everybody, and welcome to Bingefest. I'm Vinnie Civitillo.
And I'm Kay Conroy.
This is a brand new podcast where we're going to be binging a season or two of TV every episode and discussing it. You'll be able to get this anywhere you can get a podcast. That's iTunes, Spotify, etc., etc., etc. But please don't forget to engage. Write that 5-star review, like it, comment on it. Let Google's algorithm know you're out there so the show gets put in front of more awesome people just like you.
We appreciate it, and we will see you here every other week. Hey, everybody, and welcome one and all to another episode where we shit talk some TV, basically.
No, I think we're going to talk very highly today.
I think so too. Today we're talking about Watchmen, but before that, we're gonna stick with tradition and figure out what we're binging right now. And I'm happy to go first, but Vinny, I'm also happy to
No, it's
you
fine. Go
go
ahead. Go
first.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. I'm binging a couple things. Lessons in Chemistry on Apple, which I didn't realize until very recently was a book, and apparently the show did the book a grave misjustice,
Oh,
injustice, according to a friend of mine. So I'm now very eager to finish and then read the book. Although Lessons in Chemistry, the show, it's there are parts of it that are really slow. Do you know what I mean?
well, what is
And
it about? I mean, is it literally just like lessons in chemistry?
yeah, it's about a woman in the 50s who's really, really smart. She's so smart that she wants to be a chemist, like a scientist, and work in a lab. But of course, she's a woman and she can't climb that ladder because of discrimination. And in one instance, she's assaulted by her coworker, and it's bad. But then she meets a man who values her for her brain, and they actually fall in love. Um, but then he dies. God, I feel like I'm giving away the whole plot. Sorry. And she ends up running a cooking show on TV, but talking about cooking as if she's in a lab talking about chemistry.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I was going to say, when I was in journalism school back in the old days there, one of the things that I learned is that when you're reviewing something and you're talking about the plot, if you have to say "and then," you've gone too far.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. It's not the best thing I've ever seen, but it's
okay.
compelling enough that I'm watching it. Now, the best thing I've ever seen, in the last 2 weeks is Fargo. Fargo is back
I'm
for
looking
season
forward to
5,
watching that. Yeah.
and I swear to God, I am loving it so much that there was an episode where one character sort of dressed down another character, and it was so good that I rewatched that episode the following night just to
Uh,
experience it again.
I mean, I have questions. I almost don't want to ask them because we're 100% gonna cover Fargo.
Oh, I hope. My God.
Yeah, but just so I have like an idea. I mean, in the previous seasons, it became obvious at one point or another whether or not they were directly, how it directly fit in to their other seasons. Does this fit in some way? Or I guess usually you don't really find out until the end, but sometimes I don't know.
Yeah, they have not revealed that yet.
Okay. All right.
I mean, in the second season, it became clear that Molly's father was the police officer.
Yeah.
Molly was the one of the main characters, a police officer in season 1, and her father was the main character of season 2, and she was a little girl.
Yeah.
Season 3, I don't think had anything to do with the previous 2 seasons. That was oh my God, that Carrie Coon and her stepfather and the Ewan McGregor twins.
Yeah,
And
I don't remember enough about Fargo. I mean, like it all kind of blends together. I mean, I remember there was a character, the one guy who wound up doing so well at being a gangster that he got the office job. and then he wound up being the kid in
The
the next
kid
season or something, or
in the
maybe the
fourth
season after
season.
that. Yeah, I don't know. Um,
Yep.
so I mean, I know that like they all kind of tie together sooner or later. It's just a matter of how.
Season 3 is the only one that doesn't. So
Was season 3 the one with was it
the
Kirsten
sci-fi
Dunst? She
writer.
was like
No,
the crazy
that
one.
was season 2.
Oh, I
That was the
loved her in
throwback.
that.
I know. Season 2
Kirsten
was
Dunst, I had a whole
outstanding.
new respect for her as a result of that show. Like,
That season was just outstanding television.
yeah, she
And
deserves an Oscar one day. I'm just waiting for her to get it now.
or an Emmy, right? Fargo is
Sure,
television or an
sure, but
Emmy.
I want her to go all the way.
Oh yeah, because Oscars are better than Emmys,
They
right?
are. They are. It's like old Hollywood. Movies are so much better than TV,
All right, that's fair. That's
despite that
fair.
we're doing this show, right?
Yeah, 100%. So, to answer your question, I don't believe that there is a connection yet.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether or not a connection comes, it is just so freaking good.
All right.
The main character is played by the British actress who played Roy Kent's girlfriend in Ted Lasso. Have you seen Ted Lasso?
Yes.
Kelsey,
Um, Keely.
Keely Jones.
Keely was so weird
So
for me. Like,
agree, she was a little weird.
not only was
I,
she weird, it was like weird that the show was positioning her as some kind of like men's magazine supermodel, and I'm like,
mm-hmm,
no.
mm-hmm,
She's beautiful, don't get me wrong. But
right.
not like posters on the wall of teenage boys beautiful, if that makes sense. I don't know. It was just so
Yeah.
weird. And then like the Cockney accent and everything, like it just didn't connect for me that way.
She was definitely a very interesting character for sure.
Yeah.
But the thing that is very impressive to me is she pulled off that Cockney. I have no idea what she sounds like in real life,
Yeah.
what kind of accent she really has, but she pulled off that Cockney accent. Like I believe that she's from there.
Sure.
And she is pulling off a very, very believable Minnesota accent as well.
Really?
Yes,
I'd have to listen to that now.
exactly.
People speak with Cockney accents in Minnesota?
No, no, the Cockney accent is British,
Right.
and the Minnesota accent,
Right,
where
but when does she speak with the Minnesota accent?
in Fargo,
Oh, in Fargo. I totally forgot
she's
that that's what you were
yeah,
talking.
she's the main character in Fargo
Okay.
this season, and
Wow.
she talks like a native. It is so impressive. I mean,
All right.
like a native. Well, I shouldn't. Not everybody who is from Minnesota talks like that, but a lot of people do, and she sounds like she's from here.
Okay.
Very impressive. And John Hamm is terrifying as the villain. Like he's a
Yeah.
really good big bad. And oh my goodness, terrifying.
I can't wait to watch it. I don't get FX, so I usually just wait for the season to go on sale on Vudu and then I buy it. Right now it's like 20
Yeah.
bucks. I don't really want to pay 20 bucks. But it'll
No,
go down to 10 and then I'll pick it up and binge the whole show. And then we will do an
it's
episode where
amazing.
we discuss it.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So I've been I don't know. I've been binging Modern Family for like a year now. Like
I love that
I
show.
I watch like I don't know about a season's worth and then I take a break
Yeah.
and so on and so forth. I'm up to season 8 now. I think there are 12. So I'm getting there. I'm getting there. I guess when I'm done with that or when I feel like I've watched enough of that, I'll probably go back to Gilmore Girls and do like another season of that. And it'll be back
Mm-hmm.
and forth like that because both of them just have a tremendous number of episodes for me to get
Yeah.
through.
There's more Modern Families than Gilmore Girls, but
For
yeah, I feel
sure.
that.
Yeah.
I just introduced my sister to
Although
Modern Family.
Gilmore Girls is twice the length. Like the episodes are like your 45,
Oh
50
yeah,
minute
that's
episodes,
true.
whereas Modern Family, yeah.
That's a
So
good
I'm
point.
sorry, who did you just introduce what to?
My sister, my mom and I went to Iowa for a couple days, and my sister had never seen an episode of Modern Family, and we were just sitting around at her house, sort of
Shout out
killing
to
time before
Colleen.
dinner. Colleen, yeah. And I was like, well, you want to watch a Modern Family? That's my go-to, and I need to kill some time, like just being
Yeah.
very entertained. And she goes, "What's that?" And I was like, "Wow, get ready."
Yeah.
So we turned on, I think we watched 3 episodes in a row, like very quickly. And then I went to bed and she like blew through 10 more.
Yeah. I think it's such a perfect like background kind of show
Mm-hmm.
because I I don't know, you could probably skip like 6 seasons and you'd
Yep.
know what's going on. Like if you just
Yep.
drop into any episode, it doesn't like there's no real continuity that matters. I mean, it happens every so often. Like there's the point where Claire takes over as the CEO of the company, and like every once in
Right.
a while somebody will have a baby. But like beyond
Yeah.
that, I mean, like you could drop me into any episode of that show, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
Wait, so I have a question for you. How are you watching Modern Family? Is it on Hulu?
No, I bought it years ago, and
Oh, you bought it. Because
yeah.
if you're watching it on Hulu, which is where I watch it, you could watch Fargo because that's also on Hulu.
Hmm. All right. I'll have to
Yeah.
look at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The new episodes drop the following day on Hulu.
I'll consider it. I'll have to see if there's anything else on Hulu that I would want because I'm not gonna like subscribe to Hulu just for the one show. It's probably cheaper to just buy it on Vudu at that point. But if there are other
Mm.
things that I want to check out too, yeah. I think the last time I subscribed to Hulu, I exhausted Timeless and I can't remember the name. It Future Man, I think the show was.
Mm.
Um, I really want to watch The Handmaid's Tale. Um,
No.
no,
I mean, I haven't seen it only
okay,
because it feels like we're living it in some parts of this
sure,
country, and
yeah,
it's really scary to me. But
yeah.
yeah, I've heard it's wonderful. Elizabeth
Yeah.
Moss is just brilliant in it. I've heard it's incredible.
So what I've heard is that only a certain portion of it is the book because I read both books, and then I've heard that like maybe after the point where they cover at least the first book, maybe the rest of it is original content. So I'd love to check that out, just to kind of see where they go with it, but I've never gotten around
Interesting.
to it. Anyway,
Interesting.
I kind of want to talk about Watchmen. Are you good for that?
Yeah, let's talk about
Yeah.
Watchmen. All
All
right,
right.
you give the background on
Sure.
Mr. Moore because you were
Yes.
telling me things that I could not even
Yeah.
process.
All right, so it's hard to figure out where to start with any discussion of Watchmen because it's a complicated book and a complicated history behind the book. But yeah, so we're not going to get too super deep into the book because this is a conversation about the show, but it's important to talk about at least because the show is a direct sequel to the book. That is this one right here, Watchmen, by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Basically in the 1940s to the 1980s, there was this company, Charlton Comics, and they went out of business and DC bought them up. And I don't know if he volunteered or he was assigned, but Alan Moore was given the project of writing a story with the characters that they got from Charlton Comics. And at some point, DC changed their minds and they were like, hey, listen, we know how you do. And if you write this story, half the characters are going to end up dead. The other half are going to be damaged goods. We're not going to be able to use them anymore. So why don't you just take the characters, change up a little thing about each one, and then make them your own? So um, let's say the Question becomes Rorschach, Captain Atom becomes Dr. Manhattan, um, the Blue Beetle becomes Night Owl, et cetera, and you get an original story. And I mean, when you talk about a way that the book is written, I mean, this is a satire about superheroes. Like basically what Alan Moore was trying to say was like any attempt to take superheroes and put them in a realistic world or a realistic setting would just be grotesque and awful. But he did it in such a complicated way. Like there's there's the comic book story, then there's prose, then there's another comic book story that weaves itself through that's like a pulp pirate story, and all of it leads to like this ends justify the means trolley problem of Ozymandias saying, look, if I do nothing, billions of people are going to die because the US and Russia are going to blow each other up. Or I can flip this switch and kill millions of people, but then we'll all have a common enemy and the world will be saved. And it's this sort of story about like, do we put our faith in the wrong people? Like if superheroes were real, they'd be just as likely to destroy the world as save it. And I don't know. I
Voice.
think, yeah, I think Alan Moore wrote this to be like, hey, isn't this so freaking dumb? And the world kind of looked at him and, as Rorschach would say, whispered, no. Because that's the direction that comic books took from there on. Watchmen is so dense and complicated. I don't even think half the people that read it, myself included when I first read it, because this is a dense book, even understood that it was a satire. Like, most people consider this like one of the best violent superhero books ever. And Alan Moore, would not love that. But one of the things that really drove Alan Moore nuts was, as long as he was making these original characters, he decided, hey, would it be, or he asked, would it be possible for me to own the rights to this book, to these characters? And DC was like, yeah, no problem. As soon as it's out of print, as soon as we're done using the characters for a year, they can revert back to you, which at the time sounded pretty reasonable because comic books routinely were printed and then forgotten for, ages. However, to stick it to Alan Moore or to hold on to this license, DC has never allowed Watchmen to go out of print. They've printed, I don't know, we've got to be on like the 40th edition by now. They've printed it in large format, small format, black and white. They have motion comics, whatever. So it made Alan Moore very bitter. And another thing that happened to make Alan Moore very bitter was that people started adapting his books into movies. You got From Hell, you got The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and those movies sucked so hard and missed the point so hard that Alan was like, from here until forever, take my name off of anything you do with my stuff. I want nothing to do with it. He doesn't get royalties. He doesn't have like his name in the credits on anything, nothing. So he's very reclusive now. He sits alone in his house. I shouldn't say alone. I'm pretty sure he has a wife and a daughter, but he doesn't come out. He practices magic. I don't know. He says that he like tries to summon entities that are, I don't know, spirits that he's afraid to call anything other than angels for fear of the kinds of things that happen when you piss spirits off. I don't know. That's Alan Moore.
He's mentally ill, is what you're saying.
I don't want to say that. I think people can draw their own conclusions on Alan Moore.
So here's where I worry about him, though. Yes, the schlock that Hollywood pushes out can be horrendous.
Yeah.
But he could be missing out on royalties. Like, how does he make a living now? I mean,
well, he's still a writer. I mean, he's not necessarily a comic book writer.
What does
he certainly
write?
Doesn't write for Marvel and DC. I mean, he's done like some independent stuff here and there. He actually, I mean, this is how funny it is. He had such a bad relationship with DC after all of this that he started his own comic book company, I think. And then they got bought by DC at some point or another. So yeah, I mean, it sucks. I don't know what to tell you.
I can't be mad at him because he's not wrong. Like, Hollywood has turned some of his work. What was the quote from Sean Conroy about the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
I don't know the quote specifically, but what basically happened there was Connery was offered two scripts. One was the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and the other one was The Matrix. And he didn't understand The Matrix at all. He was offered the Morpheus part, the one that Lawrence Fishburne got.
Wow.
Yeah, and he turned down The Matrix to do League of Extraordinary Gentlemen because I guess he understood that. And you're talking about such a colossal mistake in terms of like this or that he said, like, I just can't trust myself to pick good movies anymore. I can't understand this stuff anymore. I'm done. And he retired. And it was funny because when Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out, everybody wanted him to come back. And he was like, look, if I was going to come back, it would be, if I was going to come back for one movie, it would be Indiana Jones. But no. And I was like, no, it's actually a good idea that he passed on that too, because that was just garbage also.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel really bad for Alan Moore that DC screwed him again and again and again. Like, essentially.
Yeah.
That sucks.
I mean, and now they don't even have to keep it in print. Like, you can just sell it digitally forever and ever. And I'm sure that's good enough to, placate the deal or whatever. But yeah, I mean,
they suck.
Yeah. So as part of their, routinely, we got to keep using these characters. We got to keep doing things with them. They made a movie and then they made a TV show. Damon Lindelof, who was the showrunner and co-writer on my favorite all-time show, Lost, was assigned or volunteered. I don't know how these things work behind the scenes, but he was the one who was going to do the Watchmen. And he sends Alan Moore a personal letter to try and get his blessing. You know, like he's like, look, I know that you hate all of this stuff, but I promise you, like, I'm a huge fan and I'm gonna do my best to see this through and make this great. And Alan Moore basically writes him back and was like, fuck off. I told DC never to contact me again. I want nothing to do with you.
Poor
So
David.
yeah. But I actually consider that poetic justice because for years, any interview he's in where somebody asks him a question about the mythology of Lost, he just rolls his eyes and is like, you don't get the point. We were trying to tell a character story, you know? And here, Alan Moore is like, you don't get the point. Go away.
It's a really valid
Yes.
observation. I love it.
And so with
All
that,
right.
Kate, bring us into the show.
All right. So the show actually starts in, I believe, 1921, Oklahoma, with the massacre of what then was called Black Wall Street. It was a thriving, beautiful African American neighborhood that was destroyed one day brutally, basically because of white fragility.
Yeah.
It was truly, truly horrendous. People were flying planes over that neighborhood with machine guns. There were bombs going off.
Whoa.
Like, talk about terrorism. This was terrorism 101, and they killed a ton of people. And there was one little boy who escaped, somehow miraculously escaped. And then fast forward like 100 years or maybe 90 years, because I think he was 10 at the time, and he's literally 100 years old when we pick up in the future. And he starts to, I don't know, get vengeance. And then the rest of the show is sort of the backstory of how he got to where he is and why he is seeking vengeance and who it is that he is seeking vengeance on. Overall, so I don't know if we're gonna go into each episode, but you had a really interesting observation when we first started watching it, and that was, did we really need to tell another Watchmen story set against white nationalism and the KKK? And like, it's interesting that that Damon Lindelof decided that those two things needed to come together. So what you want to say more about that?
Well, actually, the first thing I was going to say was I had never heard of the 1921 massacre until I saw the show, which I think might actually be the point of bringing it up.
Maybe.
When you talk about like generational trauma and like these kinds of things that are happening, like, you know, the white people wrote the history books, and you know, this doesn't get taught in schools, at least not when I was in school and being taught. And I mean, when you talk about how horrendous this is the sort of thing that probably ought to have been taught and probably should be, but no, I hadn't heard. I thought this was something they were just making up for the sake of the show, and then you know, you look it up and you're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, it really happened. And you know, there are people in our world right now, present day, who say things like slavery was 200 years ago, reparations are bullshit. I don't understand the point. This happened less than 100 years ago. I mean, and people's livelihoods were destroyed forever. So I get that reparations doesn't seem fair to white people, but I don't think it's unfair.
Yeah.
Like, if your grandfather was ruined financially and now somebody said to you, sorry about that, that sucked, that was our bad, here's a check for 100 grand. Like, that could change your life for the better. That could put Chloe into a better college, maybe. Like, that could help your family significantly. And in the grand scheme of things, it's not that much money. Anyway, I didn't mean to go down a rabbit hole.
No. I mean, it's also talking. Well, I mean, it feeds into the show because they do. Right. I actually, and maybe you would have a better insight on this. I don't know why they brought up reparations in this show, because it's like a big deal in the first episode or so when we first meet Angela, and then they really don't discuss it much after that at all. I mean, I think the only thing that really like it comes into play for is that Angela is a, one income household cop salary, and she has an in-ground pool at the end there. And maybe that was how they explained that. But like, I don't know, like
Maybe.
it never really comes into play. I guess one of the things that we talk about when we talk about generational trauma, and they bring it up in this show, is how angry Hooded Justice is and how
Yeah.
angry Angela is. And,
Yeah.
is it that we've passed that on in some way? Is that
Mm-hmm.
anger um, either by nature, because at one point, I don't know if you remember, this is like a small detail in the show that you can overlook. They have that it was like the extraterrestrial anxiety meeting, and one of the
Yeah.
people was like, I wasn't even there, my mom was there, and like I feel like it passed her anxiety onto me. And I rolled
Yes.
my eyes when he said that, and then I was like, wait a minute, I think I'm supposed to like get something here about how like we're passing on anger and we're passing on anxiety about this stuff.
Yeah. I sort of rolled my eyes initially at that as well.
Yeah,
But then, Angela's grandfather and Angela don't meet until he is literally 100 years old.
yeah,
But she has that same anger.
yeah,
Um, and I also think I want to pause here for a second and just talk a little bit about the alternate history that we're experiencing in this show,
yeah.
because so Dr. Manhattan, I'm not gonna give his backstory. You're better at
Sure.
that. I don't know if you want to do that really quickly now, or
I mean, there's not much you have to say. Dr. Manhattan was a watch fixer, whatever you want to call that, like a watchman. I don't know what is the
that's
word.
funny.
Yes. So he's fixing a watch or something. Or no. He gets into some chamber that
Yeah.
because like there was a watch in there from his girlfriend that he needed to save, but he gets locked in, and then he gets like his atoms torn apart or whatever, and he becomes pretty much this like time displaced god. Like Dr.
Right.
Manhattan exists at every point in his history. So like
Right.
he knows the future, he knows the past as far as his perspective goes. Yeah,
He's
he's
the
been
ultimate weapon.
yeah, as far as
So,
everybody is concerned, he's been living on Mars for the last like I don't know, however long,
right.
40, 50 years, whatever it's been since the 1980s of the Watchmen. I guess the only really important thing to talk about there is that if you've seen the movie ends with Ozymandias using Dr. Manhattan to blow up like parts of New York, which will then
Right.
scare the world into being like against Dr. Manhattan. Which, if you think about it, is a little bit closer to what Alan Moore was thinking. Like, the team is the likely thing to destroy the Earth. But in the
Yeah.
comic book, which this continues, it's a squid. Like Ozymandias manufactures this gigantic squid that attacks New York. And so I think like some people who maybe watched the show and watched the movie but didn't read the book might have gotten a little confused there.
Yeah.
This is probably the first time I've ever seen where a TV show is continuing a book rather than like a movie or another show. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to say that Dr. Manhattan ultimately is the perfect weapon, and the war that we're fighting in the 70s, of course, is Vietnam. And the United States lost that war, but in this universe, the alternate history is that Dr. Manhattan basically demolished
Yeah.
the country, and the North Vietnamese and the like anybody who was a combatant, gone, destroyed. And
I if I recall, I could be wrong. You might be right about this. I think the idea was that he stepped foot in Vietnam and they surrendered. Like the second he walks in there, they're like, "Oh, okay, never mind."
you know what? You're right. I'm remembering the movie. I'm totally
That's
remembering
possible.
that
I mean,
scene in the
I could be
movie.
wrong about that too, but yeah. I'm pretty sure
Anyway,
like just his presence stops the war.
that
But
would make
yeah,
sense. That would make way
yeah,
more sense. But so anyway, in this universe, Vietnam is the 51st state, which, try to wrap your brain around that because it's
right.
hard.
And
And
Nixon was still president long after
Nixon
because yeah,
stays, there is no Watergate.
yeah.
And Robert Redford is elected president and then somehow just stays president for
Well,
decades.
because Nixon, well, because like they repealed the what was it, the 14th Amendment? I could be wrong about that.
Whatever amendment that
Yeah,
made
whatever
it,
amendment allows, has term
that
limits. Like they
Roosevelt,
repealed
yeah,
that one. And so Nixon had longer terms, and now Robert Redford has had like some serious terms, I guess. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So anyway, when we meet Angela, she's a little girl growing up with her parents in the state of Vietnam, the United State of Vietnam.
Yeah.
And it's a like a mixed race community. There's white people, there's black people, there's Vietnamese people, there's Chinese. Like it's just sort of what the melting pot of the United States sort of was supposed to be. There's certainly a lot more Vietnamese people than any other race. And a lot of people, a lot of Americans speak Vietnamese because that's what the locals speak. But it is fascinating to consider the United States that includes Vietnam.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went on a tangent there.
No, it's
So
okay. I the first thing I think of when you talk about that, like the Angela growing up in Vietnam, I don't know why I liked it so much, but just the fact that she's so inspired by the blaxploitation film. It was like
yeah,
they made it up. It wasn't a real one. It was Sister Night. The
yeah,
nun with the motherfucking gun was the
yeah.
the thing on the box, and that becomes her name later on. Because I didn't get that at first. Because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, she has like a rosary on her like
Mm-hmm,
costume or whatever. I didn't get that for the
mm-hmm.
longest time. It wasn't until I watched it this time around and I put it together. I was like, oh, she's supposed to be the nun.
Yeah, the nun on the box of
Yeah,
that videotape, that VHS videotape,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But so Angela's growing up in Vietnam, and her dad was a serviceman and he married her mom, and a suicide bomber who's pissed off that the United States is still there kills them. So she ends up in an orphanage and she's almost rescued, but then her grandmother has a heart attack and she finishes growing up in this not so nice orphanage.
yeah.
And the thing that I still don't get is that episode, a man walks into a bar. Angela's last name is a bar. Guy
Ah,
walks into a bar. That's the name of that episode. What we don't understand from Dr. Manhattan's perspective, what about Angela draws him to her? Because he pursues her from the get. He walks into
right.
a bar, finds her. It's the anniversary of her parents' death. She's having a beer. He sits down and he starts to like come on to her, and she's just like, "Whatever, man. What are you
Yeah.
doing?
I mean, I
Do
loved
you
that
know?"
conversation. I could have watched like a two
Yes,
hour version of that conversation.
100%.
But no, it's the same reason Dr. Manhattan does anything. It's because he knows that he's supposed to. Like he can see his whole life play
Oh,
out, and so he must do these things. And he's like think about the end of the show. We're gonna spoil this, because I think if you're gonna watch this, go back watch the show if you haven't yet. But in the end of the show, Dr. Manhattan dies, and he knows this. Like he
yeah,
tells her right from the beginning, it's gonna end in tragedy in exactly 10 years. He
yeah,
knows that he will die. He can do any number of things to prevent this. Like when he's standing out on the lawn, he could just teleport himself and Angela out of there. But he doesn't because he knows that this is when it's supposed to happen. And like
yeah,
right before that, like right before they walk out, he's like, "Oh, by the way, this is the moment I fell in love with you." And she's like, "What? Now?" And he's like, "Well, no. I've always loved you because I've always experienced every moment in my life. But just so you know, right now, when I'm about to die, is the moment I fell in love with you, you know?" He
God.
does it because he has to. It's part of his whole nihilistic thing. I don't know.
I feel like I just want to sit with that for a second because if I mean, human beings are hardwired to survive, right? If you put anybody in a room and tell them that the air is poison, they're going to start to cover their, right? They're not going to just
Sure.
accept it. And Dr. Manhattan has lost a lot of his humanity. I don't know that he's lost all of it, but he's lost so much.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I
he
would argue
doesn't
the fact that he
fight.
does fall in love with Angela would say that he hasn't lost
Right.
at all. Yeah.
I agree. Yeah, that's definitely an example of, not having lost all of his humanity, but he's lost enough of it that he's willing to die and leave behind a wife that he loves and three children just because it's the right time. There's no
Yeah.
fight.
And I mean, didn't he make the deal with the grandfather? Like he was saying, like, listen, not only am I going to die, but you're going to be the one that kind of like, um didn't it, he like sells himself out. because what do they call it? It wasn't the cavalry. Was it the cavalry? The
Yeah.
Cyclops, whatever they become at the end of the
Yeah.
show. Um, like they know where to get him because doesn't the grandfather tell them? And Dr. Manhattan is the
Maybe.
one that says, like, all right, you're gonna go tell them to do this. You're gonna tell True to do this, and you're gonna get your justice. But like this is just how these things have to play out because that's how they will. You know?
Yeah.
And they do their little paradox moment there where she's like, ask him how, how he knew or that the clan robe was in the closet, and he's
Mm-hmm.
like, who's Crawford or whatever. Like,
Who's so
there's that
yeah.
paradoxical moment where she knows about something because he warned her about it, and she tells him because like
And
it's
that's how
it's
he
like
knows about
one
it.
is the other is the other is the other. But
Yeah.
one of the things I was going to say, speaking of Dr. Manhattan, is it's weird in that I don't think you necessarily have to watch Watchmen to enjoy, or sorry, read Watchmen to enjoy this show. But at the same time, I feel like all of my favorite characters in this were the legacy characters. Like it's like like I said, I could have spent like 2 hours listening to Dr. Manhattan talk to Angela just because like
Mm-hmm.
I love those legacy characters. I wanted more time with Ozymandias. Ozymandias is like infinitely interesting to me. You have this we talked about the trolley problem a lot on other people's business, but like this is the
Yeah.
ultimate trolley problem. Like pull the switch and kill millions or don't and watch billions die. But at the
And
same
he
time,
did it so easily.
yeah, and he not only, I mean, this is like the torture that is this character. He doesn't just do it. He's like self-righteous enough to be upset that he doesn't get the accolades for saving the world. Like he's put into a
Yeah.
paradise and they ask him why would you want to leave this paradise? You're in heaven. And he goes, because heaven doesn't need me. Heaven is not, thanking me up and down for saving the world and maybe doing it again. Because that's the first thing he does when he gets out. He's like, I'm going to save the world again. And it was
Yeah.
funny that Lori mentions to him, like, yeah, you keep saying the world is going to end and it doesn't seem to, does it? Like that's part of the problem with the trolley problem is that, like, yes, you flipped a switch and killed millions to prevent the death of billions, but if you didn't, was it necessarily definite that the US and Russia
Right.
were going to blow each other up? I
Right.
mean, this is an alternate history and they were right on the cusp of that doomsday clock, but
Yeah.
so were we for a long time there, and it just doesn't seem to have happened.
So speaking of Lori, let's talk about her for a second.
Lori Ispechik.
Because yeah, I can't pronounce her last name,
I
but okay.
know.
She was Silk Spectre,
Yes.
right? Right. So her parents were the comedian and
The first
God, what
Silk
was her
Spectre.
the first Silk Spectre.
Yeah.
Okay, that's right. And that relationship was not a relationship, it was just sexual assault. He raped her.
He attempted to rape her the first time, and then I think she allowed it the second time. And because that drove a big wedge between her and Lori's adoptive father. Um, yeah. So I never understood in the book, like Lori gets so upset that the comedian was her father, and then she's just okay with it at the end. Like in this, she's taken on her father's name. She's Lori Blake instead of Lori Ispechik. Like, um, the comedian's name was I can't even remember at this point, but his
Something
last name
Blake.
was Blake. So yeah,
Right.
that's where she gets it.
So, first thing, she has completely rejected those roots, and she is now a law enforcement officer
Yeah.
dedicated to bringing down vigilantes,
Yeah.
people who are going to stop a bank robbery in progress and whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think her motivation is? I don't know that she ever told us. She's just somehow gotten to this point.
I don't know where I read it. So this could be fan fiction for all I know. But I read somewhere that in like okay, at the end of Watchmen, the book, she and Dan decide to be vigilantes again. I think she takes on the name the comedian, something like that.
Mm.
Um and then I read somewhere that the two of them get caught somewhere in the 1990s, and she basically decides like, okay, if I work for you, I don't have to go to jail. And Dan
Oh,
Night Owl doesn't, and so he's presumably in jail when this show is going on or something. I don't know. Because I actually
Oh,
wondered like why they didn't bring Dan back. He survived the last
I thought
book.
I wondered about that as well. I mean, they brought his equipment back, his little
Right.
flying
The
machine.
plane. Yeah, yeah. Archie.
Yeah, yeah, but they didn't. Yeah, I thought that was weird too. Okay, so that explains that. Now let's talk about her relationship with Dr. Manhattan
Sure.
because she's got a giant blue dildo in a briefcase that she carries around with her.
Right? And like,
And I'm
why?
like, why? What
Why that
could
big?
that
Like,
why that big? Because
because
I
I've
mean,
read the
yeah,
book and I mean, it was never portrayed that large. And I've seen him in the show because there are times when he
he's
walks
naked.
right
It's
up in his
full
birthday
frontal.
suit and it's big, but it's not obscenely big.
Comical?
It's not practical
Yeah.
joke big, you know?
Right. It's not bachelorette party big.
So I guess I guess the thing I was thinking was my assumption is that there's something about that dildo that creates like a static or an electric charge, like something to kind of give you like a little spark, which is maybe something you would get from Dr.
Got
Manhattan.
it.
And in the 80s when Dan like makes this thing for her, like it must take more electrical equipment to make that kind of thing happen than you could maybe fit with like smaller transistors and chips today. I don't know. That's my thought.
So
But like, god
it didn't.
damn, that is so big.
And we this is a rabbit hole we probably shouldn't go down, but you know
I
what?
totally. I mean, I don't mind.
Let's just do this. So I did not realize that Dan made this for her. So
Yeah, isn't
now I
that
need to
sad?
know, like, what? Because he
Yeah,
loved her.
right.
Dan loved Silk Spectre. It's just so bananas. Okay,
Yeah,
so the next question I have is Angela and Lori start to work together, even though Angela's not really cool with it. And Lori is looking at Angela like she's a suspect the whole time. I know that, okay, we're spoiling this, right?
yeah,
All bets are
yeah,
off.
fine. Yeah,
Calvin is Dr. Manhattan, but he has no memory of it.
right.
Angela does.
Mhm.
Does Angela know about Lori's history with Dr. Manhattan?
She should. I mean, you'd have
So
to think.
that's
Okay, so like, if the Watchmen, sorry, they weren't the Watchmen in the book. If the crime busters were real and the Minutemen
they
were
were
real, they'd
cops.
be
I mean,
celebrities. You know, like people would know who they
right,
are.
right.
Um, like the intern guy that Lori has,
Yeah,
you know,
Petey.
he's like, listen, I did my dissertation on you. Don't think of me as a fan. I know the history of the world. I know who you are.
Yeah.
So I mean it would not be, you know, secret knowledge that Lori and Dr. Manhattan were an item, you know? At least I think.
I just feel like I'm gonna be thinking about this for so long
I
because
think
I
Big
wonder
Blue
if
is a
that's
part of me
where
now. Like I don't think I'm ever gonna forget about that.
no, I know, but I just wonder if that's partly where Angela's hostility comes from. Because
Toward
Angela
Lori,
is, yeah,
I never considered that. Well, I
like
mean,
if,
Lori is trying to pin like a murder or something on Lori on Angela. So I mean, there's going to be some
well,
hostility there. Not pin as in like frame her for, but
she's
she seems to be zeroing in on Angela as a suspect.
right.
Um,
She is. You're right.
especially
But
because she has evidence that's contrary to the testimony that Angela is giving her. Like she knows she's lying about something. And once you start lying to the police about a murder, you are pretty much the prime suspect. So, yeah,
yeah. All right. Let's talk about Lady True for a
sure.
second
Yeah,
because I don't think Lady True was part of any of the old
no,
books,
right.
but she was certainly one hell of an interesting character.
Yeah,
I mean, so she was born, she's the daughter of Ozymandias,
hmm.
born from stolen spunk.
Yeah, stolen spunk.
Her mother was a cleaning lady in Ozymandias's South Pole, North Pole lair,
Yeah,
and literally just shot herself up one day and then escaped, like just ran away, which I thought was really interesting because she didn't leave after she knew she was definitely pregnant. She left immediately after. So
Yeah.
if it didn't take, what was she going to do? Like try to get her job back?
Maybe.
Get all the way. So that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so Lady True was very interesting. I thought she was a really fun villain who kind of had a good heart. Like she helped Angela, she helped
Yeah.
her grandfather,
Yeah.
she
I mean,
helped
again,
Lori.
it goes back to the ends justifying the means, which is what
Right.
Watchmen kind of was about. Like, just like her father, there's a line a little bit later, like at the very, very end of the show, where Hooded Justice, I can't remember his name other than Hooded
It's
Justice.
Will. Isn't it Will?
Will, okay, so Will talks to Angela and he says, for a guy who could do so much, he didn't do enough. And so True feels the same way. She's like, you got
Yes.
this guy with all these godlike powers, and he could be
Yes.
doing everything. And there's a very good reason why he does it, because superheroes don't exist. There was a Superman book that I love to death. It's called Peace on Earth. And in Peace on Earth, Superman wakes up one day and he says, you know what? I'm going to end world hunger. And he goes and he gets like a whole thing of wheat and he flies it around the world feeding the hungry. And before he's done, you have nations that, kick him out, say, no, you can't come here. These are our people. You have warlords in like Burma or something who like poison the wheat. And he finally just stops and he's like, I can't do this. The world has to fix this themselves. And any reasonable story would have to have a message like that. Because if you have a story where Superman just solves world hunger, well, that's great, but Superman doesn't exist. So what's the point of your story? And that's kind of where we're getting here. Like Dr. Manhattan can't solve the world's problems, but True believes he should, and so she decides to take on that power.
And she decides she's going to do it. She's going to take care of global warming. She's going to take care of hunger. She's going to take care of despots and
And would she?
warlords. Well, that's a good question, isn't
Yeah,
it?
because even her own father is like, no. Takes a narcissist to know a narcissist, and I'm going to tell you, you don't want somebody with that kind of power running around.
100%.
I think that what he says is anybody who deliberately wants the power of a god definitely shouldn't have it.
Well, that's just it. That's a more accurate statement. I have a tiny bit of experience with narcissists, and there's no way in hell a narcissist would ever admit that they're a narcissist. So
yeah,
that just didn't track. But Lady True was certainly an interesting character to watch.
yeah. Like I could have watched so much. Like I say, like the legacy characters. Like I could have watched so much interaction between Ozymandias and Lady True. Like him being like, I will never call you daughter, and she's like, it must have been hard for you to get down on your knees. Like even as she's rescued, like she must spend billions, if not trillions, of dollars rescuing Ozymandias. Why? So he can be there and watch her prove him wrong or whatever, like.
But only after so let's back up for a second. She rescues him. He gets in the spaceship. She says, could you do me a favor and just put your hands on your hips there? And he does. And she sprays him with, I don't even know what, but
Whatever
it looks like shiny gold.
Yeah.
He looks like a statue, and she puts him in the
Carbonite,
foyer.
Right?
Carbonite.
Yeah.
She puts him in like the hallway, the foyer.
Yeah, the lobby.
And lets people think that he's a statue.
Yeah.
And we are not told for how long Ozymandias is just left to be a statue. And whether or not he's aware of it, that would be the ultimate FU. Like if he can hear everything that's going on, but can't.
Lori coming over and being like, why would you make a statue of him old? He looks like shit.
He looks like shit. That was so funny. Oh my God.
The funny thing is, okay, so this is not the first time I've watched this show. I watched it as it was coming out. The thing with me in TV, like if I'm not rewatching things over and over, I forget a lot. Like I'll remember the broad strokes. I'll remember Big Blue until I die. But like for the most part, the rest of it, I will kind of lose. So I had completely forgotten that he was really that statue.
Me too.
Yeah, like, can we talk about like the planet, the Europa thing for a second?
Yes.
Like, it was so hilarious to me that they put him on trial for a whole year. Like The funny thing about like, first of all, and was it our year or was it Europa's year? Because a year on Europa would be even longer. So just
Yeah.
imagine
Yeah.
like 10 years of this trial going on and him just being so bored and just like the first thing he does is just like fart at like the general, like even just the idea that these creatures would put him on trial.
Well, and the oh my god, the game warden,
Yeah.
the fact that okay, so well, Dr. Manhattan described this paradise to Ozymandias, and Ozymandias begged to go without thinking through how he would ever get back. That was just so like
Yeah.
such an
I totally
easy
would have been like, can you come
miscalculation.
check on me like every so often? Just, you know?
I need a ride home eventually.
Yeah.
But Dr. Manhattan just puts him on Europa. It's paradise. And within what seconds, Ozymandias gets bored. So Ozymandias creates an enemy. Like
Yeah.
for until we fully know how it happens, you think the game warden is just this scary big bad that we
Yeah.
don't understand why he's trying to keep Ozymandias in check, and
And it's
Ozymandias
funny
created
because
him.
he's supposed to keep him there as though he's like a prisoner, even though
Right.
he can theoretically, if he can figure out how to leave, there's nothing like he's not actually in jail or anything. You know, he's there of his own
No.
accord. Um, but actually, this transitions well into another thing we could talk about because one of the things that I wrote down here was a quote from when the game warden guy is dying, and he says, "Why did you give me a mask?" And
Yeah.
Ozymandias said, "Because masks make men cruel."
Yeah.
And so that hit so hard for me. I was like, wow, that is such an amazing line.
Yeah.
They now going back to the beginning of the show, they put the cops in masks. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's interesting because Alan Moore believed that this was a crap show because it was all about white supremacy and police brutality. And he's like, if somebody watches this show, they're going to come away thinking that's what Watchmen is. Like,
Right.
but I didn't really get that there was I didn't really get that there was a message about police brutality in this. Maybe you could shine a different light on it.
No.
Like it was interesting that in the beginning of the show, the cop has to ask for permission to take out his gun, and he dies as a result of that. Like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
guy in the car ahead of him were all wearing Rorschach masks, and I'm sure we could talk a lot about that too. Just the fact that Rorschach was a heavily conservative character in the original book, and now like he is the messiah for all of these white supremacists.
Yeah.
There's a whole discussion to touch on there, and I don't know if we should, but like
I
you
don't know
know,
if we
like,
should either,
yeah,
but getting back to masks make men cruel.
yeah,
There is an insidious pattern going all the way back to the closet, the the KKK robes in the closet that come with a mask. And White
yeah.
Knight was orchestrated, turns out, from the inside in order to put police in masks, in order to
Oh,
create this whole situation. Remember, I can't think of his name, but the guy who played Bob Benson on Mad Men, one of my all-time favorite characters,
Bob
he
Benson.
he admits, the senator, whatever his name,
Oh,
the
okay, sure.
clean cut, aw
Mhm.
shucks
Yeah.
Oklahoman, he admits that White Knight was staged from the inside out in order to legislate putting police in masks.
Hmm.
And so when you think about how the masks are the weapon of the bad guy, even when the police are using them, it's
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah. I could talk about this show for hours. We haven't touched on
I know.
what was the name of the guy, Wade, or
Oh
the
my
guy with the
God.
mirror
Mirror guy.
face, mirror
Mirror
guy.
guy. Looking glass.
Looking glass is the name. I thought it was
Yeah.
so funny, like when he finally gets
I love
told,
him.
you know, like it was all a hoax or whatever. He throws the alarm in the garbage and he walks off to his house, and then he quickly comes back and
Goes right
takes the
back to
alarm
get it.
out of the garage. I thought that
You
was
know,
hilarious.
that's, I mean, he hasn't had a full generation yet, but I would say that's generational trauma.
Yeah.
Like he's going to have some kind of security system, some kind of alarm forever until the day he dies.
Yeah. I felt so bad for that guy. Like
I
the girl that
know.
pulls him into that mirror place and then just
Horrible.
yeah, I mean she saved his life, but it was
She
yeah,
did.
it was
But
horrible.
I was so glad that she died. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, so mad.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that she didn't get very far with his clothes so that he could like grab them when he got out. It
I
was
mean he probably could have
horrible.
taken clothing off of just about anybody at that
He
point. Like,
probably could have,
no.
but he was disoriented and, there was glass everywhere. It just was easier to, you know,
Yeah.
awful
I mean
though.
it's interesting that like they showed the psychological trauma that this thing that was supposed to save the world caused so many people.
Yeah.
You know, because in at least Watchmen the movie, I'm sure it would have happened in the book too. Ozymandias has this whole wall of televisions, and he's like, I am gonna have to watch the repercussions of what I've done. That's my penance. Like I have to look at these TVs and see these like families crying over their dead relatives and everything.
Yeah.
And he doesn't really, because if we're well, I mean, I guess he does for a while, but at some point he just decides to go to heaven, you know, like the
He gets
Europa
bored.
paradise.
Yeah.
So he skips out on that penance.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it's not even just the fact that people died and people are missing their lost relatives. Like this caused psychological trauma for a lot of people. I mean, people are terrified of these squids. Um,
How funny is the tourism commercial for New York
yeah.
that they test? Oh my god! And at the end, it's Michael Imperioli, the guy who played Christopher in The Sopranos.
Mm,
Oh my god, that was
yeah.
some of the funniest shit I have seen in a long time.
I thought it was interesting that that's, you know, you have this superpower to determine whether or not people are lying. And I guess theoretically, yes, you are a cop and you're using it for that like very practical purpose. But like his actual
Not a
job is
sidekick.
just that he like goes to marketing stuff and he's like, yeah, these kids are lying. The cereal is crap. You know, like,
I thought that was amazing. So you think that's his real job? I thought that was just his side hustle.
I don't know. I'm sure it pays a lot better than the cop job, but
I'm sure you're right.
yeah.
I'm
Especially
sure
if it
you're right.
really is the Cyclops people behind the scenes, like pulling the strings or whatever. I'm sure that
Yeah.
I'm sure if you are trying to control the police, then you're trying to get applicants that you think would kind of suck. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk just a little bit about Don Johnson and his wife.
Which one was Don
Um,
Johnson?
he was Judd. He was the guy who gets strung up at the
Okay. The
beginning.
bad guy. Yeah, yeah,
The bad guy, yeah,
yeah.
the guy with the KKK robe in his
I mean, there's so
closet,
many
which
people you could
so
probably say are the
funny.
bad guy.
I
I
know.
don't even know that I would necessarily put him in that, you know, he was a bad guy, but not really in the grand scheme of this story. Like he doesn't do anything, you know, he doesn't get the chance to really do anything other than die and set
Well,
off the events of the story. But
no,
yeah.
I think he was in on the White Knight conspiracy, though.
What the 1921 thing? Wouldn't he
No,
have? He
no, no,
couldn't
the
have been
White Knight.
born.
Remember when all the cops' houses were broken into and shot up?
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I
I'm
forgot
pretty sure
about
he
that.
was
Yeah. No,
in
he.
on
I
that.
guess he would have had to have been. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I forgot all
Anyway,
about that. As important as that is, because it sets off the bad guy's plan. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um,
All right. So
so
that dude.
first,
Yeah.
first, I haven't seen Don Johnson in anything in forever. So props to him for still working and still being able to turn out a performance because
Sure.
that was a great performance.
Yeah.
And second, how funny was the interrogation between Lori and Don Johnson's wife
Yeah.
when
Especially
they're
when she
sitting
tries
around?
to hit like the old school remote control button, and she's
Yes,
like, "Hold on, it's stuck." You know.
Lori is like talking through this plan, and just Lori thinks this isn't an interrogation. Lori thinks she's just trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and she posits something that sounds absurd, and his wife is like, well, yeah, that was the plan initially, but now you've fucking figured it out. And
uh,
Lori looks at her like, what the fuck? And she goes, oh, was I not supposed to confess just now? And that's when she grabs the remote and she's like, God damn it, this technology is old. And she finally like, and the chair that Lori is on just drops out of the floor and suddenly Lori is kidnapped. That was some of the funniest, oh my God, work I've seen in a long time. That was
yeah,
great.
and I mean, in the end, when True is monologuing, kind of, you know, giving off the whole story, and
Monologuing.
she's like, "Just do it," like, and everybody around
Yes.
her is like freaking out. Like all the other, I guess you call them the
Yes.
guys, they're all like freaking out, like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. What? And she closes her eyes and she just braces for it. Like, just do it. Yeah.
So that was hilarious. But if I were Lady True, I would have been like, no, you're going to sit through and listen to this
Yeah, I guess. But at that point, like, they
pettiness.
wouldn't have been able to keep them in, right? Because they needed them to sit right there because that's where the lasers were going to be.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
I mean, but at some point it would have become obvious in the course of the letter, like, and this is why I'm killing you all now. Like,
Yeah, you're right. You're right. Ugh.
one thing I
I
didn't
think,
totally
yep,
get, or maybe like wasn't really executed well enough, was when they send this the frozen squids to kill
yeah,
everyone or kill
yeah,
her, and he says it's going to kill everything for a 5 block radius or whatever. Nobody else seems to die. I mean, yes, like there's like one or two other people, but they're all the cops are standing out there in this rain of squids, and none of them seem to be getting like
yeah.
killed.
That was
I don't
weird.
know. Yeah.
That was weird. Because you would think that a frozen squid that's 3 or 4 inches in diameter falling from the sky at that velocity, that's
Oh
going to
yeah.
go through the roof of a police car. That's going to
Yeah.
go through the roof of the phone booth that
Yeah.
Angela's in. I don't see how everybody didn't die.
Yeah.
So I
I mean,
agree with you.
even
I thought
like
that was
Angela
weird.
holding up that thing, I'm like, that better be a
No,
strong thing. Like,
it just didn't feel really real. I don't know.
it
That
was
was
an
one
awesome
little.
visual when Lady True, like, it goes right through her hand and she's just looking at this perfect
She's
circle through
looking at
her
her.
hand, like, oh, well, I guess he's got me.
Yeah, yeah, that was good. The
Hmm.
only other two people I feel like that were kind of fun that we didn't talk about yet are Pirate Jenny and Red Scare. They were such tertiary characters,
Wait,
but
who
they
was
brought.
Pirate Jenny? I don't remember Pirate Jenny.
So she was the woman who had the mask across her face. She was Red Scare's
Oh,
partner.
okay, yeah, yeah, the other cops. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they were the other like vigilante cops.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so they were always sort of bantering back and forth with each other, and they were just so silly.
Yeah.
They were so silly.
I don't have a lot to say about them, but I did want to mention that I thought Hooded Justice's origin that they came up with for this show was perfect. Like,
Yes.
it's almost like I can't even imagine it being anything else at this point. Like, where else do you get the hood and the noose? Like, it
Yep.
was flawless. Because I
Agreed.
mean, Hooded Justice was just this character in the comic books that like was mysterious in that way. Like, I think even Silk Spectre 1 mentions that she never saw his face. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so like even his teammates never knew who he was, and it was just
Mm-hmm.
that is such a perfect way to explain all of that. Like
I
almost
agree.
as if that was the plan all along. As much as
Agreed.
Alan Moore would be like, "No, fuck you. That's not what I intended."
Oh man. I do kind of wish that he would get off his high horse and just decide if something is good independent of his own butthurt feelings. I mean, at the beginning of the
Yeah,
show, I was talking about how I feel really sorry for him, but he really missed out on a great piece of art.
this show.
Like, this show is
Yeah,
fucking art. It was great.
yeah. I would say I liked V for Vendetta the movie. It
Yeah, I
is
loved it.
not as good as the book, but it is still
Right.
pretty cool. I mean, I think one of his big criticisms of V for Vendetta, the movie, was that they made it more about American politics. And all right, I grew up in America, so that connected more with me because I didn't grow up in Margaret Thatcher
That's
1980s,
right. They were
Um,
American filmmakers, though. That makes perfect sense to
yeah, I
me.
mean, you can get the BBC to do a more accurate movie. I don't know. And even
Yeah,
Watchmen, I
hold
mean,
my
the
breath.
Watchmen movie, it's not terribly good. I think Zack
Right.
Snyder is not a good filmmaker, and I've been beating that drum for so long now. Like every
Yeah.
time he comes out with a movie, it was like Sucker Punch sucked, Watchmen sucked, Man of Steel sucked, Batman versus Superman sucked. When are they going to stop giving this guy assignments? But like, um,
Yeah.
the larger version of Watchmen that very few people watch, there are 3 cuts of that movie. There's the theatrical cut, which sucks. Then there's the director's cut, which actually adds in a lot more, like exposition and explanation for this
Context.
context, and that was better. And then there's an ultimate cut, which God, I don't know, is like 3.5, 4 hours long, and that's even better. Now, am I saying you should watch a 4-hour cut of a Zack Snyder movie so that it's
No.
better? Not really. No, and I would say the same thing about Man of Steel and Batman versus Superman. Batman versus
Wait.
Superman has a 3 hour cut out there. Is it better? Yes. Should you watch it? No. But
Is Man of Steel the one that I like? That's the one
no,
with
no.
no? Are you
You're talking
sure?
about, you're thinking Superman Returns with Brandon Routh and
Yes.
Kevin Spacey.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
I will love that forever. Man of Steel
Yeah.
was the one with Henry Cavill where he punches General Zod for like 45
Oh, yeah,
minutes.
that was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. I appreciate that you keep track of my favorite movies.
There you go. We've been doing this for 6 years now. This is only episode 3 or 4 of this show, but like, no, I think like Alan Moore in a lot of ways is not wrong. But yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
if I was a writer and somebody was going to do a movie of my thing without my involvement, I probably would be pretty butthurt about it. I don't know that I wouldn't watch it,
But
but I probably
he
would be kind of annoyed. I don't know.
specifically requested not to be involved.
Yeah, right, right. I mean, they would
So
want nothing more than his involvement.
the least they could do is send him a check, royalties, and here's
They
a
do.
screener.
They actually do. So, like I think like the law is that like they cannot not send him royalties. So instead, he has requested that all of the royalties that would be given to him go to artist Dave Gibbons. So like for any of these
Wow.
things, he's like, just send my cut to the other guy who's attached to this. Like, yeah,
Holy shit.
yeah. I mean, it's you got to give him some credit in that it's
Yeah, I
actually,
do.
like he's putting his money where his mouth is or whatever, and saying like, no, I don't want any piece of it. But Watchmen was a very complicated. I mean, Time Magazine had said, ranked, whatever you want to call it, Watchmen is one of the 100 greatest novels ever. Not comic books, not graphic novels,
Wow.
novels. Like, toe to toe, shoulder to shoulder with like all the other stuff that you love and read throughout school, Hamlet, Huckleberry Finn, whatever you want to call it. I don't remember what the other 99 were, but Watchmen is on that list because Watchmen is a very complicated but well done book. And it's so weird because Alan Moore not only doesn't want it adapted because of its complicatedness or whatever, he also doesn't think adults should be reading it at all. Like Alan Moore has said, the fact that you have all this nostalgia for characters that were created 50, 60 years ago to entertain 12-year-old boys is a dangerous thing. It's infantilism. It brings on fascism in the world. You should not be doing it. Get on with your lives and be adults like me, raising the dead or whatever he's doing out in that cabin. I don't know. I don't know. But, and
That's
I
really
feel like we
interesting.
should kind of wrap this up, but there's so many things
Yeah,
about Watchmen I want
I
to talk
know.
about. Nostalgia as being a problem.
Oh my
Nostalgia as
God.
being a dangerous drug was so on the nose, but so good. like,
Yeah.
Angela takes her nostalgia and they tell her taking someone else's nostalgia is even more dangerous. And I was like, oh, I'm writing that down because that is such an interesting point to make here. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about generational trauma, I mean, she's experiencing his trauma firsthand.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
she is. Wait, do you want to, just for anybody who might not have watched this, do you want to explain what nostalgia is? The drug?
The drug. Okay, so nostalgia was a pill intended for you to be able to relive some of your older memories. Like, be in the good old days of when I was 20 or 30 again,
Right.
like just as like hallucinations or whatever. Hooded Justice gives Angela a bottle of his nostalgia to take so that she can understand where he was coming from, why Cyclops was a problem. Um, and she experiences his whole life. And that's how we get the flashbacks of his life. Which,
Yeah.
as a Damon Lindelof fan, I don't know that I want to call myself a David Lindelof fan. As a Lost fan, I happen to notice the writer's trademark of just as things are getting like going and whatever, we're gonna stop. We're gonna take like at least a whole episode to go through flashbacks and show us how we got here. And I was like, all right, this is a good story, but I want to get back to Dr. Manhattan and Ozymandias.
Yeah. There was a lot of that. There was definitely quite a bit of flashbacking.
A lot of that, yeah.
Not
Whole
that I was always
episode
mad.
breaks.
Yeah, we got Angela's whole backstory in one episode. We got Hooded Justice's whole backstory in one episode with very few breaks. And it really interrupted the narrative of present day. but it was worth it. Like I don't know how else we would have gotten
Yeah, I mean
that
it's always
information.
that way with him. Like Lost is my favorite show. You know, you do love it in the end, but when you're going through it and you're like, no, I just want to know what happens when they get down into that hatch. You're like, no, I don't need a whole backstory on who Desmond is. I guess I do, but I don't want it right
Seriously.
now. You know?
Yeah, I guess I do, but I don't want it right now, which
Yeah,
is not the point. The point
yeah.
is to, yeah, keep you on the edge of your seat.
And how crazy was it that in that backstory, that guy is able to just torch the Jewish delicatessen right in front of people, right in front of a cop, and be like, "Good night, sir." I mean that shows you
Terrifying.
how people talk about, like, let's say, like, quote, the good old days, but there were never good old, like, if that's something that could have happened. I mean, just like, I know it's an alternate history and everything, but I'm sure it's the sort of thing that did happen at some point or another. Like, you just
Yeah.
got like this blatant racism, and uh
I
it
want to
breaks your
use the
heart just watching it.
phrase, it does break your heart. I want to use the phrase make America great again.
Yeah.
And the, obvious question to pose to that phrase is for who? It was it was pretty great for white people. It has not ever been great for people of color, for trans people, for LGBTQ people. It's never been great for those people. I, I don't know how you, and Jewish people, I don't know how you justify turning back time so that we have segregated lunch counters again. Like, is that really what we mean when we say make America great again? I don't know. Nobody's ever sufficiently explained that to me.
You don't
And
like it,
and I'm starting to,
unsubscribe. I don't care.
I know, right? Sorry, I don't mean to
We're
get
doing
so
this for us
political.
at this point. I don't care.
I know we don't have a no politics rule
Yeah.
anymore.
We used to, now we don't.
We used to, and I'm not saying that we should just talk politics,
Yeah, no.
but
But it was
but
relevant to this
this
story in a big way. So
100%. Yeah, the fact that there's just a guy walking down the street who purposefully throws a Molotov cocktail through the window of a Jewish delicatessen, waves goodnight to the police officer who witnessed the whole thing, and heads off home, happy as
yeah.
a like
And then
that
he
was
does
just
arrest him, and
fine
he's just immediately let out. Like, oh yeah, don't
immediately
worry about it. Yeah.
because so many police departments are racist. We're racist. Like it's really hard to get away from the reality of the history. And sanitizing history is not a good idea.
All right. So final thoughts on Watchmen.
Highly recommended. It's going to
Yeah, this
stay
is
for
a
me.
great show.
Yeah, I mean, it stayed with me for a long time the first time I watched it. And I'm like you, I forget things. I hope kind of on purpose so that I can relive them for the first time sometimes.
That's cool.
Yeah, I loved it the first time. I loved it the second time. I'm positive I'm gonna love it the third and fourth time.
Yeah, I mean it was great rewatching it because knowing where it was going, there were
Yeah.
things at the beginning that I was able to pick up that I wouldn't have necessarily the first time around.
Mm-hmm.
It is a great show, and I absolutely think you should definitely check it out. For the time being, it's on HBO Max, but HBO, Warner Brothers, they're one big dumpster fire right now. They're just selling off everything they can. As of the time we record this, they just kicked what's that show, Westworld, off their HBO Max. They sold it off to
What?
some other yeah, like you can't watch that on there anymore. And I was like, I really hope that they at least hold on to Watchmen long enough for Kate to finish this, and so, like, so we can
Yeah.
record this episode. But
I
yeah,
mean, I loved this show so much that I would find it on Vudu and buy it if it disappears from HBO. I would absolutely buy it. It's great.
absolutely. I mean, this is a fantastic show. Go out and check it out.
Yeah. Yep.
So what are we watching
All right.
next? Just to
It's a
give
really good
people that, like,
question.
homework assignment of what they can watch.
You know, we probably could do the first season of Superman and Lois
We could, we could.
because we
I
both are.
All right. Let's say that that's the next episode of the show. I don't necessarily want people to get the
Oh,
vibe that
it's a
this
little
show is just
superhero-y.
always going to be like me
You're
kind of
right.
stuff, like the superhero. Like, I
You're
did
right.
enjoy. I'm not. I did enjoy watching Gilmore Girls. Like for our talk on that.
So, what about season one of Fargo? I could probably plow through that.
Oh, that's a
Although,
shame because now Yeah, I want to watch the new one, but yeah, I guess we could do
Yeah.
season 1 of Fargo.
I don't know. I don't want to watch it if we're not both like, yeah, oh my God. Because I am still, watching season 5.
Yeah. All right, we took a quick break to decide this, and we decided on What We Do in the Shadows season 5 as being the next thing, the next episode we're gonna do.
Yeah, it's a little bit out of order because we have not yet done seasons 1 through 4,
I don't think we
nor have
have
we
to.
done the
I don't think we have
movie.
to.
I agree. I don't think we have to.
I
Anybody
think we can
who,
kind of gloss over a lot of that. I mean, I think it's sort of like what I said about Modern Family. Once you get a hook on who the characters
yes,
are, yes, there is a season arc in every season, but it's not where like you would have to have seen it, like
agree.
so we'll talk about What We Do in the Shadows seasons 1 through 4, like as background text in the movie,
Yeah,
but we'll focus on season 5 for the next show.
perfect. All right. We'll
All
see you
right.
next time then.